Ever wondered how even the mightiest military minds can screw up big time? Prepare to be amazed as we dive into the top 8 most colossal military blunders in history. From the swamps of New Orleans to the icy plains of Russia, we've got it all. Get ready for a wild ride. Battle of New Orleans. Remember that time the British tried to invade the US and ended up fighting a battle that was already irrelevant? The Battle of New Orleans took place in 1815, after the War of 1812 had officially ended. Due to slow communication, both sides were unaware of the peace treaty. The British, expecting an easy victory, marched confidently into the swamps of Louisiana, only to find themselves outmaneuvered by the ragtag American forces, led by Major General Andrew Jackson. Jackson's strategic use of earthworks and unconventional tactics allowed his men to repel the British onslaught. The British suffered over 2,000 casualties, while American losses were minimal. The humiliating defeat boosted American morale and helped propel Andrew Jackson to the presidency. So not only did the British lose the battle, but they also inadvertently created a future American president. Talk about awkward. Operation Barbarossa. Who invades Russia in the winter? Hitler, apparently. In 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union that would become the largest military operation in history. Hitler, blinded by his ambitions and overconfidence in the German military, disregarded the advice of his generals and underestimated the resilience of the Soviet people. Over 4.5 million Axis troops poured into the Soviet Union, initially making significant progress. However, the Germans soon faced the brutal Russian winter, stretched supply lines, and an increasingly fierce Soviet resistance. As the temperatures dropped, German soldiers struggled with frostbite, inadequate clothing, and dwindling supplies. The brutal conditions were matched only by the tenacity of the Red Army, which launched counterattacks and put up a desperate defense. Hitler's decision to delay the invasion by several weeks due to an earlier military campaign in the Balkans proved to be a costly mistake. Operation Barbarossa ultimately stalled at the gates of Moscow, and the German war machine would never fully recover. Spoiler alert, it didn't end well for Hitler. Battle of Culloden. When the mighty British army almost lost to a bunch of rebels, we got the Battle of Culloden. In 1746, the British faced off against Scottish Jacobite rebels who aimed to restore the Stuart monarchy to the British throne. Led by Charles Edward Stuart, also known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, the rebels had achieved a string of victories that brought them dangerously close to success. The British, determined to put an end to the rebellion, sent an army under the command of the Duke of Cumberland to confront the Jacobites. Despite their advantages in numbers, discipline, and firepower, the Brits made a royal mess of things due to tactical mistakes and poor battlefield choices. They chose to fight on boggy, uneven terrain that hindered the movement of their infantry and artillery. Additionally, the British commander was overly cautious, allowing the Jacobites to regroup and launch surprise attacks. Luckily for them, the British eventually managed to regain control of the situation, thanks in part to the exhaustion and dwindling supplies of the Jacobite forces. The Duke of Cumberland narrowly clinched a win and crushed the rebellion, earning him the nickname Butcher for his brutal post-battle reprisals against the defeated Scots. Charge of the Light Brigade. Ready for the mother of all communication screw-ups? Meet the charge of the Light Brigade. In the Crimean War, the British Light Brigade, composed of around 670 cavalrymen, was ordered to attack a well-defended Russian position during the Battle of Balaclava. What should have been a simple mission to capture some artillery quickly turned into a chaotic and deadly affair. Due to a mix-up in communication between British commanders, the Light Brigade was mistakenly sent charging headlong into a valley surrounded by Russian artillery on all sides. The valley, which would become infamously known as the Valley of Death, proved to be a disastrous location for the ill-fated charge. As the British cavalry thundered forward, they faced a relentless barrage of cannon fire and musket shots from the Russian forces. The Light Brigade suffered heavy casualties, with nearly half of its men killed, wounded, or captured. The charge became a symbol of the senseless waste of human life and the dangers of poor communication in warfare. Battle of Little Bighorn. When General George Armstrong Custer thought he could take on a massive Native American force with a fraction of the troops, we got the Battle of Little Bighorn. In 1876, tensions between the United States government and Native American tribes in the Great Plains reached a boiling point. Custer, a Civil War hero and flamboyant commander, led his 7th Cavalry Regiment on a mission to force the tribes back onto their reservations. Custer, blinded by ambition and a desire for glory, grossly underestimated the strength of the Native American forces. Instead of waiting for reinforcements, he decided to launch a bold attack against a village teeming with thousands of Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. This fateful decision would lead to one of the most infamous last stands in history, known as Custer's Last Stand. As Custer's forces charged into battle, they were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of Native American warriors who were well armed and well prepared for the attack. The 7th Cavalry Regiment found themselves surrounded and cut off from any chance of escape. Despite a desperate fight, Custer and his men were ultimately wiped out, suffering a crushing defeat that shocked the American public. Battle of Gallipoli. Welcome to Gallipoli, the beach vacation turned military disaster. In 1915, during W1, the Allies launched the Gallipoli campaign against the Ottoman Empire to secure the Dardanelles Strait and establish a supply route to Russia. The campaign, conceived by Winston Churchill, was marred by poor planning, underestimating the enemy, and a lack of coordination between the British, French, and Anzac forces. The initial naval assault failed, forcing a land invasion. As the troops stormed Gallipoli's beaches, they met fierce Turkish resistance led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Hindered by difficult terrain, the Allies got bogged down in a bloody battle of attrition, compounded by inadequate supplies and the outbreak of disease. After months of brutal fighting and mounting casualties, the Allies admitted defeat and withdrew. The Gallipoli campaign resulted in over 250,000 casualties, mainly among the Allies. It tarnished reputations, including Churchill's, and marked a turning point for the Ottoman Empire, boosting their morale and solidifying Ataturk's leadership, who would become the founding father of modern Turkey. Maginot Line. When France spent a fortune on an impenetrable defensive barrier that the Germans simply bypassed, the world was introduced to the Maginot Line. Built in the 1930s along the French-German border, the Maginot Line was an elaborate system of concrete fortifications, underground tunnels, and heavily armed bunkers. The French believed that this modern-day fortress would deter German aggression and force them to attack through Belgium, just as they had done in World War I. However, the French underestimated the German military's ability to adapt and innovate. When World War II broke out, the Germans launched their Blitzkrieg strategy, which emphasized speed, maneuverability, and surprise. Instead of directly assaulting the formidable Maginot Line, they outflanked it, swiftly invading France through the Ardennes forest, an area the French had considered impenetrable. The German forces bypassed the Maginot Line with relative ease, making it virtually useless. The massive investment in the defensive line proved to be a colossal waste of resources for the French, as it failed to prevent the rapid German invasion and occupation of France. The Maginot Line has since become a symbol of the dangers of overconfidence in military planning, and a cautionary tale about the importance of anticipating an enemy's ability to adapt and innovate. It's a costly lesson that still resonates in modern military strategy. The Dieppe Raid, a disaster for the Allies. When the Allies attempted an ambitious amphibious assault on German-occupied France and ended up with a catastrophe, we got the Dieppe Raid. In August 1942, the British-led operation aimed to seize the heavily defended port of Dieppe, involving over 6,000 infantrymen, mainly Canadian, as well as British commandos, and a small number of American Rangers. From the start, the raid faced issues. The element of surprise was lost, and the Allies confronted well-entrenched enemy positions. Hindered by the pebble beaches, the tanks became bogged down, leaving the infantry exposed and vulnerable. Communication breakdowns and insufficient air support further compromised the mission. With the troops pinned down on the beaches, the decision was made to withdraw, but the damage was done. The Dieppe raid resulted in over 3,600 casualties, sparking widespread criticism and a re-evaluation of amphibious assault tactics. Despite its disastrous outcome, the raid provided the Allies with hard-learned lessons that contributed to the success of future operations, including the D-Day landings in Normandy.